A vernacular or vernacular language is the native language or native dialect of a specific population, especially as distinguished from a literary, national or standard language, or a lingua franca used in the region or state inhabited by that population. Etymology. The use of vernacular is not recent. In 1688, James Howell wrote, concerning Italy, doubtless there were divers before the Latin did spread all over that country. The Calabrian and Apulian spoke Greek, whereof some relics are to be found to this day, but it was an adventitious, no mother language to them. 'Tis confessed that Latium itself, and all the territories about Rome, had the Latin for its maternal and common first vernacular tongue, but Tuscany and Liguria had others quite discrepant, viz. the Etruscan and Messapian, whereof though there be some records yet extant, yet there are none alive that can understand them. The Oscan, the Sabine and Tusculan, are thought to be but dialects to these. Here vernacular, mother language and dialect are already in use in a modern sense. According to Merriam-Webster, vernacular was brought into the English language as early as 1601 from the Latin vernaculus, which had been in figurative use in classical Latin as national and domestic, having originally been derived from vernus and verna, a male or female slave respectively born in the house rather than abroad. The figurative meaning was broadened from the diminutive extended words vernaculus, vernacular, varo. The classical Latin grammarian used the term vocabulary vernacular, terms de la langue nationale, or vocabulary of the national language, as opposed to foreign words. Concepts of the vernacular. General linguistics. In contrast with lingua franca and general linguistics, a vernacular is contrasted with a lingua franca, a third-party language in which persons speaking different vernaculars not understood by each other may communicate. For instance, in Western Europe until the 17th century, most scholarly works had been written in Latin, which was serving as a lingua franca. Works written in Romance languages are said to be in the vernacular. The Divina Commedia, the Cantar de Mio Cid, and the Song of Roland are examples of early vernacular literature in Italian, Spanish, and French, respectively. In Europe, Latin was used widely instead of vernacular languages in varying forms until c. 1701, in its latter stage as New Latin. In religion, Protestantism was a driving force in the use of the vernacular in Christian Europe, the Bible being translated from Latin into vernacular languages with such works as the Bible in Dutch, published in 1526 by Jacob van Liesvelt, Bible in French, published in 1528 by Jacques Lefebvre de Taples, German Luther Bible in 1534, Bible in Spanish, published in Basel in 1569 by Cassiodoro de Reina, Bible in Czech, Bible of Krallis, printed between 1579 and 1593, Bible in English, King James Bible, published in 1611, Bible in Slovene, published in 1584 by George Dalmash. In Catholicism, vernacular Bibles were later provided, but Latin was used at Tridentine Mass until the Second Vatican Council of 1965. Certain groups, notably traditionalist Catholics, continue to practice Latin Mass. In India, the 12th century Bhakti movement led to the translation of Sanskrit texts to the vernacular. In science, an early user of the vernacular was Galileo, writing in Italian c. 1600, though some of his works remained in Latin. A later example is Isaac Newton, whose 1687 Principia was in Latin, but whose 1704 Optics was in English. Latin continues to be used in certain fields of science, notably binomial nomenclature in biology, while other fields such as mathematics use vernacular. See scientific nomenclature for details. In diplomacy, French displaced Latin in Europe in the 1710s, due to the military power of Louis XIV of France. Certain languages have both a classical form and various vernacular forms, with two widely used examples being Arabic and Chinese. See varieties of Arabic and Chinese language. In the 1920s, due to the May 4th movement, Classical Chinese was replaced by written Vernacular Chinese. As a low variant in diglossia, the vernacular is also often contrasted with a liturgical language, a specialized use of a former lingua franca. For example, until the 1960s, Roman Rite Roman Catholics held masses in Latin rather than in vernaculars. To this day the Coptic Church holds liturgies in Coptic, not Arabic. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church holds liturgies in Ge'ez, though parts of Mass are read in Amharic. Similarly, in Hindu culture, traditionally religious or scholarly works were written in Sanskrit or in Tamil. In Tamil country, Sanskrit was a lingua franca among the non-Indo-European languages of the Indian subcontinent and became more of one as the spoken language, or Prakrits, began to diverge from it in different regions. With the rise of the Bhakti movement from the 12th century onwards, religious works were created in the other languages: Hindi, Kannada, Telugu and many others. For example, the Ramayana, one of Hinduism's sacred epics in Sanskrit, had vernacular versions such as Rangandada Ramayanam composed in Telugu by Gana Buddha Reddy in the 15th century, and Ramacharita Manasar, a Hindi version of the Ramayana by the 16th century poet Tulsidas. These circumstances are a contrast between a vernacular and language variant used by the same speakers. According to one school of linguistic thought, all such variants are examples of a linguistic phenomenon termed diglossia. In it, the language is bifurcated, i.e., the speaker learns two forms of the language and ordinarily uses one but under special circumstances the other. The one most frequently used is the low variant, equivalent to the vernacular, while the special variant is the high. The concept was introduced to linguistics by Charles A. Ferguson, but Ferguson explicitly excluded variants as divergent as dialects or different languages or as similar as styles or registers. H must not be a conversational form. Ferguson had in mind a literary language. For example, a lecture is delivered in a different variety than ordinary conversation. Ferguson's own example was classical and spoken Arabic, but the analogy between vulgar Latin and classical Latin is of the same type, excluding the upper-class and lower-class register aspects of the two variants. Classical Latin was a literary language. The people spoke vulgar Latin as a vernacular. Joshua Fishman redefined the concept in 1964 to include everything Ferguson had excluded. Fishman allowed both different languages and dialects and also different styles and registers as the H variants. The essential contrast between them was that they be functionally differentiated, that is, H must be used for special purposes, such as a liturgical or sacred language. Fasold expanded the concept still further by proposing that multiple H exist in society from which the users can select for various purposes. The definition of an H is intermediate between Ferguson's and Fishman's. Realizing the inappropriateness of the term diglossia to his concept, he proposes the term broad diglossia. Sociolinguistics. Within sociolinguistics, the term vernacular has been applied to several concepts. Context, therefore, is crucial to determining its intended sense. As an informal register in variation theory, pioneered by William Labov, language is a large set of styles or registers from which the speaker selects according to the social setting of the moment. The vernacular is the least self-conscious style of people in a relaxed conversation, or the most basic style, that is, casual varieties used spontaneously rather than self-consciously, informal talk used in intimate situations. In other contexts, the speaker does conscious work to select the appropriate variations. The one he can use without this effort is the first form of speech acquired. As a non-standard dialect in another theory, the vernacular is opposed to the standard. The non-standard varieties thus defined are dialects, which are to be identified as complexes of factors: social class, region, ethnicity, situation, and so forth. Both the standard and the non-standard language have dialects. But in contrast to the standard, the non-standard have socially disfavored structures. The standard are primarily written, but the non-standard is spoken. An example of a vernacular dialect is African American Vernacular English.